On this episode of Insight, keeping tabs on others is easier than ever. When is it okay and when does it cross the line?
I am very happy for my mum and also my sister to know where I am.
It felt like Big Brother, but without the audition.
He started sending me messages about kidnapping me, raping me.
Did you ever think that you breached her privacy?
Without a doubt, you're breaching their privacy.
Are the police equipped to deal with cases of tech-based stalking?
Absolutely not.
There are so many victims of stalking that are left on their own.
Is it difficult to prove guilt?
It can be.
Jimmy's just heading down Webster Road. Right now he's doing 34 k's an hour.
My dad uses Life 360 to track my speed and how I drive.
My son calls it the Stalker app. It's more about warning me if you're driving too aggressively.
At first I was really disappointed. I didn't know I needed it. I reckon I'm a pretty good driver, safe driver.
We can see if he turns it off, and I will message him saying, turn it back on, don't turn it off. But by the same token, if I want to know where he is, I don't use the app to find him. And I try and always make sure he understands that I'm not going to use the app to stalk you. I will ring you and say, Jimmy, where are you at the moment?
I thought they trusted me, but clearly they don't, but I coped with it.
I'm kind of surprised he's actually letting us to continue to use it. Hello, darling. Particularly with my wife, when she goes out and parties with her friends, I do like that ability of, if something happened, being able to find out where they are.
To be honest, at work I'm okay, but sometimes I go out with my friend, I turn off my app with my girl.
So it does stalk where you are, and my daughter does not like that.
I'm not in the app because at the time where my dad introduced me to the app, I was 17 and my dad had lots of curfews on me. Now I feel not hesitant about being on the app because now I'm 22 and I feel like they don't really have a say in where I am and my whereabouts, so it's okay for them to know where I'm at, especially when I'm going overseas.
I think there's no downside to having it. My parents would have loved something like this.
That's right.
Nicole, you have 3 children. Do you use any tracking in your family?
Yes, there are actually 5 children. I'm in a blended family and there are 5 between us, and we use Life 360 as well.
How does it help you day to day?
They're aged between 10 and 14. They catch the bus to school and they're starting to be out and about independently. So it's just the peace of mind that we know where they are and we can get to them if they get lost.
Anthea, you're a parent of 4. Do you track your kids?
I don't track my kids. My kids are aged between 3 and 14. The skills that kids learn from being independently mobile and not necessarily having their whereabouts located include things like forward planning, decision making and communication, having to actually check in and let people know what they're doing and where they're going to be. And by taking away that, if you're tracking them all the time, potentially you're reducing the chance of them developing some of those skills. As well as being a parent, I've done some research in this space. I'm a paediatrician from the Children's Hospital in Melbourne, and we've asked lots of parents across Australia about tracking, 2,000 parents in fact, and around 70% of parents said they either do use a device to track their kids or they're thinking about it for lots of different reasons. And the most common reason is, as we've just heard, about being reassured and being worried about safety of their kids, but there's potentially some downsides for kids as well.
What about partners? Did they tend to agree with each other in terms of what to do?
20% of parents disagreed as to whether or not it was the right thing to do to track the whereabouts of their kids. And interestingly, around a third of parents told us their children didn't want to be tracked, but they still decided to do it because they were wanting to keep an eye on them and worried about their well-being.
Are our kids safer when they're being watched?
We might feel like they are, but it's not necessarily the case that it's any different. And in fact, they may actually not have the same level of awareness or skills about looking out for themselves if they feel like someone else is doing it. So there's an argument that they may not be as safe if they think that that responsibility has been handed over to their parents.
Sarah, you're 21. You live with your parents. Do they use technology to keep an eye on you?
Yes, my mum does at home.
What does she use?
So we use Find My iPhone, which is the app located on your Apple phone. We really like using this app because it's a little bit different to Life 360. It doesn't provide those notifications. You have to go and select the app to see where someone is.
How do you feel about that?
I am very happy for my mum and also my sister to know where I am. We decided to use it when we were adults, especially when we are leaving home and going on nights out, and so I feel a lot safer if they know where I am.
Yuvraj, you're also 21 and you're also living at home. Have your parents had conversations with you about this?
Yes.
And how do you feel about it?
It's something that we didn't really meet eye to eye. And I think a big part of that was the trust aspect. The fact that I could easily just message my parents and have that communication aspect and let them and be transparent about it and be like, these are my whereabouts, this is where I am, this is where I'm going. I think that's a lot more fruitful and engaging and actually better, rather than them constantly having to check my location, because that adds stress for them. So I think purely on that basis, we mutually agreed upon not going through with it.
Was there a privacy aspect for you as well?
There initially was, but as I've grown older, I kind of understood their aspect of it as well.
Why do you think at that stage they wanted to know where you were?
It's just parental instinct. I was younger at the time, less educated, and I think as part of that, it's just parental instinct. They don't want to know where their child is. Is their child safe? What are they doing? And again, it's sort of reaffirming what I'm putting across to them. It's not saying that they don't trust me, but we care for you, and this is one of the ways that we can provide that sort of safety.
Do you use any apps or devices to keep track of others?
No.
Sarah, what about you? Do you keep an eye on family and friends?
Yeah, so my friendship circle, we use Find My iPhone, as most of us have the Apple phone. And in many ways, it's a form of social connection, as well as a lot of us being interstate. And if we want to make a phone call or get in contact with someone, knowing, say, that they're at their place of work, I won't go reach for the phone to give them a call because I know that they're busy. So that's kind of how we use it.
Is that a common thing for your generation, do you think?
I would say definitely, yeah. There's an increasing number of people that you meet out who just have the app and you have conversations about it. I definitely do see the downsides of it, but it's an increasing thing for sure.
Anthea, what about your friendship group? Do you track each other?
Some people in my friendship group do, but I actually don't have the app switched on for that. So there's constantly a joke that it's because I'm running late and they're going to find me out when I say I've left and I haven't yet, or that I'm up to some sort of mischief that I don't want them to know about. But I feel, for a variety of reasons, I have chosen not to engage in that. I think that I would prefer to call or reach out and make contact if I'm thinking about a friend and what they might be doing, then have a look and see where they are located. I also think that there's a real risk that it takes up a huge amount of time. So it might just be that you're curious, so you have a look and then you pick up your phone and next thing you know, you're looking at something else and 10, 20 minutes have gone by. So it's another habit that people currently get into that I think I made the decision I don't need in my daily life.
Has anything ever happened where knowing where someone was would have helped?
In my experience, no. Certainly there can be situations where people might be in trouble and they're not able to communicate, and that might be a situation where being able to locate them without direct contact was helpful. But I think that's extremely rare. It's not to say that it would never happen, and obviously it's risks and benefits in making decisions. So for me, I feel like the benefits of the privacy and also using direct communication to make contact with people outweighs those rare situations.
Grant, you work in tech security. What are some of the ways we can sort of track and watch each other?
I would say there's two categories of tracking apps. We've got our overt applications, which is your Life 360, but we've also got a covert style tracking applications that can be quite scary and detrimental as well. But on top of that, you've got your social medias. There's things like Google imaging and things like that. You can reverse image Google pictures to find someone where they've been and things like that. You can buy a vehicle tracking device for $20. Subscription for a covert tracking application may be $60 a year. It's not a big outlay for people who use it for nefarious purposes.
Are these all legal to buy?
Yeah, all legal to buy. You can buy them off the internet. I think the legalities come into it in different states of how that information is used.
In terms of vehicles, some cars already have GPS tracking installed, is that correct?
Yes. There's a couple of different reasons why. There's a safety element where they sort of have inbuilt SOS functions. So if you have an accident and you don't know where you are, you can press a button. But the applications might serve as a service reminder and know where you park your car and all that sort of stuff as well. But any member of the family or anyone who's got access to those, VIN numbers and all that sort of stuff can actually log into those applications and use them.
Cameron, your company car was factory fitted with a GPS tracking device. What can you do with that?
The device that was fitted on the vehicle was not so much, it was factory fitted through an app. So that gives you the ability to be able to obviously see the vehicle's location. You can also lock the car remotely, unlock the car remotely and toot the horn as well.
Is the location sharing function always active?
You can turn it off from within inside the vehicle, basically. So if anyone's driving the car at any point in time, they can override it so the vehicle can't be tracked.
One day your girlfriend borrowed your car. What was going on that day?
It was quite a special day to start with. It was her birthday. So I'd gotten up early and basically showered the whole apartment with gifts, done the whole rose petals, everything like that. Then all of a sudden she's, after accepting everything, said she had to go to work, which she doesn't normally work on this day. So off she's gone. I've then tried to call her an hour or so later where she was always glued to her phone, so not being able to reach her was quite odd. And I had a sixth sense that something wasn't right. So I looked basically into where my vehicle was, and it wasn't where she said she was.
Where was it?
It was on the other side of town. It was an address that came up with a residential address, basically parked in a driveway, that residential address.
Another time she borrowed your car and you tracked it to that same address. Did you know who lived at that address?
I didn't at the time. At this point in time, alarm bells are starting to go off because, once again, she said she was at a different location to where, so something's not right. So I've asked a friend who had access to basically knowing who was living there and gave me a name, a first name only, and that was a guy that she was seeing prior to being with me.
When you tracked the car to that address the second time, how did you know the car was there?
Using one of the features of the app was, so I've gone to this address quite, kind of putting two and two together at this stage, but still no real evidence. And I've tooted the horn in the garage. So as I'm standing out, I could hear the horn going off on the car.
At this stage, what did you think was going on?
I thought the worst. It was a really good time in our life that was about to come tragically crashing down. She was 7 weeks pregnant with our child, and we were about to start a very big life together. And the cracks were starting to appear, and this was a very, very big crack.
Did you ask her about what was going on?
The first time I didn't. I almost didn't want to know the answer, thinking that I did know the answer. Ultimately, it got to the point where, in my opinion, she was just lying to where she was saying she was, and it was tearing me apart. And I did confront her about it.
What did she say?
She denied everything.
The relationship ended. After that, what did you find out?
She then chose to terminate the baby. So that was hard. So.
That's fine, Cameron. Are you okay?
Yeah. So, yeah, she chose to terminate the baby. And then, I guess by this stage, I'm going on my own way, and I've then got a phone call from the guy that she was seeing, but at first telling me to leave her alone, even though I wasn't actually contacting her. And then he was trying to do, I guess, the macho thing and say, leave her alone. And then I'm just like, what are you talking about? I haven't been contacting her. We then start talking, and for something that should have been maybe a 30-second phone call, 4.5 hours later, we got off the phone. He had no idea. He thought I was just this older, rich guy that just basically showered her in gifts, and she said to him that she'd never slept with me, and then he's confronted her over that and said, oh, he paid me for sex, basically. Once again, another lie to get out of it. But yeah, I told him the truth, and even to the point where he was himself thinking that he was in a relationship with her as well. He knew nothing about the baby. It came down crashing down, but in the end, this guy, it was no fault of his. He had no idea who I was, and in the end, he even did the right thing. He even checked up a couple of days later, just rang again just to make sure I was doing okay. And yeah, I've never met the guy, but he turned out to be a gentleman.
Did you ever think that you breached her privacy?
Without a doubt, you're breaching their privacy. But I think if you're doing the right thing, it's like walking down the street. We've got cameras on us left, right and centre. We're getting tracked even just by having a mobile phone. If you're doing the wrong thing, you're going to get found out. If you do the right thing, you've got nothing to worry about. And that's just life in general. But yeah, I do feel at the time I did breach her privacy without a doubt. But in the long run, I feel like I dodged a bullet.
Nicole, a few years ago, you received a message from a stranger on Facebook. What did it say?
It was a really sort of vulgar and explicit message, not something I would repeat here, but it was a flurry of messages, to be honest, that came from an anonymous account to start with, but by the end of the night, they were coming from a named account, and yeah, they were the start of what would become several years' worth of messages.
What was going on in your life around this time?
Yeah, so I had just began a new relationship. I was in my late 30s at that time. We both had children, so we were in that sort of early stages of introducing the children together and just starting that sort of new stage of our lives at that time.
Did you have any idea who was sending you these messages, who it might be?
Well, it definitely seemed like someone who either had been in a relationship with the person I was with or knew him in some way, but then within a couple of days, they were using their own name anyway, and it was very clear who it was.
Did you try and block the account, but then they would turn up again?
Yes, but it became a case of new accounts continuously being created, and this went on for 3 years, so it was an escalating situation over a long period of time.
You must have dreaded opening those messages.
Yeah, it sort of became a situation where anytime you'd hear that notification on your phone, it would just make your hair stand up on end because you didn't know what was coming.
Were you the only one receiving these messages?
For about the first 6 months, myself and my partner were receiving the messages. They also contacted my mum and my ex-husband as well, who's the father of my children, which created, another whole set of problems.
Was this just on social media?
It was primarily on social media, so it was Instagram, Facebook and whatnot, and eventually it was also email and text messaging as well.
Wow, so your phone number, your email address?
Yes.
How did it escalate from there?
So after about 6 months of these continuous messages, which were kind of abusive in nature, threatening to spread rumours and sort of that sort of thing, that escalated over time. The person had created a fake account in my name and sent a series of messages to themselves from me and screenshotted those and began to distribute those. Over time, I followed all of the advice that you generally get. You block, ignore it, and I really thought that it would go away over time. That didn't happen. Ignoring it seemed to escalate it further. Towards the later half of the 3-year period, things became a lot more personal. So I was engaged and our wedding had been booked and planned, and this person had publicly put on Instagram the date and the venue of our wedding. And of course, your first instinct is to just wonder where or how they've found this information out.
How do you think this person found all those personal details of yours?
So in the case of the wedding, we found a free website online called The Knot, where you can upload some photos and put the details and everything like that and invite your family and friends, which we did. But it didn't occur to us at that time to check if there were any privacy settings. That was just an assumption that I had made. But when I saw that information go up online, I Googled mine and my partner's name and it came up. So that's what I put it down to. Yes.
Alexandra, you're a social media influencer. You're based in Bali. Is it common for you to receive messages from strangers?
Very common, yeah, daily.
Do you block them? Do you answer them?
I usually answer them unless they seem uncomfortable or inappropriate. in which case I would block the person immediately and not respond.
About 2 years ago, you got a series of messages from a man in the UK. How was he different from the other messages you were receiving?
The messages were pretty vulgar and not very coherent. It felt like something was off with him, and there's no reason for me to respond or allow him access to my account, so I just blocked him.
Had he found other ways to contact you, emails?
Yes, so he found my work email, which is available for people to contact me about work, about clients, about projects, and started emailing me there.
How many emails are we talking about?
It could be hundreds in a week. Over the course of the last year and a half, I mean, many hundreds.
In those emails and messages, would he ever indicate that he knew where you were?
It's not that hard to find out that I live in Bali. It's part of, my content. It's part of my personal brand as well. It was clear that he knew where I was, and that didn't spark any concern for me at the beginning.
Did the nature of this man's messages start to change over time?
Yeah, so about 6 months in, they went from being disturbing, incoherent, creepy and inappropriate to him talking about coming to Bali to find me. He started sending me messages about kidnapping me, raping me, performing other sexual violence against me, tying me up, various threats like that.
He sent videos as well, I understand?
Yeah, so he would send a link to a Google Drive, which I never opened, and when the threats started getting more serious and he started talking about coming to Bali, and I started getting more nervous, I decided to open that Google Drive link, and in it was dozens of videos of himself that he recorded talking to me, to the camera, telling me, again, in really graphic detail what he would do to me, and that he was obsessed with me and believed I was obsessed with him too, and he was gonna come find me. None of us believed it would actually happen until he sent a photo of a flight ticket and then a photo of him in Bali. He also sent me a photo of a body in a suitcase, said I would fit in a suitcase. He knew my height, and I stopped leaving the house, but I had friends go try to find him around the town and did see him in Bali.
What did you do when you found out that he was in Bali?
I went to the embassies, the US Embassy, the UK Embassy. I called the police in Indonesia, in Bali, in the UK, and in the US.
Did you stay in Bali? Was there a point where you thought, I've got to leave?
Eventually, I did leave. It was clear that nothing was going to be done to protect me there, and I was not okay with being afraid of leaving the house for an indefinite amount of time. It wasn't a way to live. I felt super disempowered, and I wanted to be able to advocate for my safety. So I left, and I went to a small village in Laos, and from there I went public about what was going on and shared about my story and this issue being a wider issue that plagues women around the world to my social media.
So you effectively had to go into hiding?
Yes. The word got around in the expat community and the local community, and people there take care of each other, and they were the ones that stepped up and would remove him from hotels. He tried to check into bars. He actually fled to a nearby island, and he effectively got pushed out. People don't want someone there that's disrupting the peace and making women feel unsafe or threatening women. And eventually, he clearly got spooked and left and went back to the UK.
One of your followers found the phone number of his father in the UK. What did you find out about your stalker?
So it was clear that this hadn't been the first time he'd stalked somebody, a woman, and it wasn't the first time he'd stalked a woman internationally. And I also learned that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which wasn't surprising to me. I have a background in mental health and psychology, and it was clear from his emails and his language patterns that this was likely.
You had also filed multiple reports to UK police. What happened when he arrived back home?
He was arrested.
How did it feel when you heard that?
It was a huge relief. It was shocking that something actually happened, especially because I didn't know he was going back to the UK. And it felt like a huge step forward, and for a moment that it was resolved.
Nicole, you were harassed online for 3 years. Did you ever find out who was behind it?
This person, and this is what I find interesting about online harassment and stalking and how widespread it is that this was a former partner of my partner, who I had never met before, but she did most of this from from pretty much day 2 under her own name and made no attempt to hide who she was at all.
It was someone that your husband had been dating?
He had dated her before we got together.
Did you report her to the police?
Yeah, so over that 3-year period, I reported to the police 3 times. The first 2 times I spoke to police, I didn't really get anywhere. It's not that they were unpleasant to me or rude, but it was largely dismissed, and I was basically told to keep an eye on it. And I felt at that time as though nothing would really happen to protect me unless something terrible happened. The 3rd time I contacted police, I took a different approach and I made a cybercrime report where I was able to really detail what had happened over a really long period of time. It was a huge document that I submitted, but that was ultimately referred to my local police station, and I got a female police officer assigned to that case who was incredibly supportive and guided me through the process of actually putting a stop to it.
What did she say was happening?
She told me that what was happening was stalking, and it kind of came as quite a shock to me as well as a relief. It was mixed feelings, because on the one hand I was quite confronted that what had been happening was a crime for such a long period of time that I just sort of sat by and let happen. But on the other hand, it was really validating for someone to say to me, this isn't okay. Because of the nature of these type of crimes, there's often a sexual element or a violent element or something unsavoury or distasteful about it, that you don't want to talk about it with people. You also assume that people will dismiss it, because stalking, particularly online and cyberstalking, is frequently dismissed. So I think that creates that shroud of shame and forces people into silence, which ultimately enables the perpetrators.
Di, you were in a brief on-off relationship with a man named Max.
Mm-hmm.
When it ended for good, Max started stalking you.
Yes, he did.
What did that involve?
In the beginning, he would come around to my home, knock on the door. He would turn up at work, look for me there, ask people where I was. He would then go to centre management and complain about me, and then try and, so I would lose my job or something like that.
He didn't just do this to you either, is that correct?
No, he went after everyone I care about. So my 80-year-old mother, my father had passed away months before I met him, so it's the first time my mother was actually living on her own. He went after my youngest daughter several times. He went after her boyfriend's family and my best friend.
Did he use tech as well to stalk you?
Yes, I didn't realise. I had absolutely no idea there was a tracker on my phone. It wasn't until I'd been over to see my mum and come home, and my neighbour pulled up at the same time, and we were talking over the fence. And I said, if you see Max anywhere, can you please let me know? And she's like, Di, he's here every day. He lets himself in with keys.
So he had made a copy of your keys?
Yeah, it took me a long, long time to work out how he did that. But he could see when I was leaving work to come home, so he had free rein at my house while I was at work. He would just leave when he knew I was coming home.
How do you think he was able to install a tracker on your phone?
He had my phone number, and all he needed to be was in a certain distance from me to put it back on. It took me hours to find it in my phone. And I showed my youngest daughter, kids today are really tech savvy. And this was before the cloud as well. So she put everything onto iTunes, like my contacts and my photos and that. She told me off for not doing all of the Apple updates. And so she did all of those, and then she did a factory reset, and then she put everything back on my phone. Okay. So I thought, went back in trying to find it, and it was gone. The next day, I go to work. He turns up. He's pleading with me to take him back. He hands me a letter wanting to talk me into taking him back. And all the while I'm sitting there, because I was having lunch, thinking, my phone. Sure enough, tracker was back on.
Because he was within range.
Within range.
Grant, I'm just going to ask you here, you work in tech security. How is this possible, to have a phone so close to another phone and a tracker can be installed?
It all depends on what phone you've got, what security settings are set up on the phone. But
Yep.
I think it's important to note that this type of behaviour and perpetrator behaviour is actually carried out over a period of time. So there might be a period of time where certain settings through a relationship are changed, and then it gets to a point where then it's installed. These things, it's not at that point where the relationship stops or at immediate trigger point. These things are usually happening over a period of time.
Di, you realised that there was the tracker on your phone, your daughter factory resets your phone, you see him the next day and you realise it's back on there again. Did you try and get that removed in any other way?
I eventually went to Telstra twice to have it removed. In the end, the tech guy at Telstra said, you'll need to get a new phone and phone number. So what I asked Telstra when I went back to organise all of that, I asked Telstra to keep my current phone still active so I could leave it at home and then go about my life without him knowing where I was.
Did the police get involved?
Initially, no. No, I was gathering all the evidence and going in and making statements. I had used condoms on my doorstep, the tracking information. He had created various different aliases on Facebook. I only have Facebook, I don't have any other social media. Each time he made a new persona, I would block that. So yeah, I would go in each time and report this to police. I went in there and I made 26 statements.
26?
To police over a course of 3 years. There were a couple of officers, they were helpful. One officer asked if I had a dash cam, which I had bought as a result of his offending, and he told me to point it out the back because when I was pulling in to drop off some evidence, he was actually 2 cars behind me and I didn't know. So he turned around and then came back into the police station behind me.
Was he ever questioned?
Yes, numerous times, and he would deny, and they would let him go.
Was he ever charged?
He was charged a few times. So he had a couple of convictions for breaches against the intervention order, which amounted to a fine or a good behaviour bond. I think the worst fine he got was $800, and the police told me that was a substantial fine. I said, you're kidding? He would just go on and FPOS that and just gone on his merry way.
Grant, you're also a former police officer. Are the police equipped to deal with cases of tech-based stalking?
Absolutely not. A police officer wears many hats throughout the day. There's a distinct lack of resources. There's a distinct lack of training especially within the family violence space. And technology moves at a breakneck speed as it is, and it is very difficult for people in that space to keep up with it all the time, let alone, a police officer who is delivering a death message on one day and dealing with the traffic accident on the next and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, and I'd like to think that there has been a significant change within the police in our current role. We work very closely with the police up in Queensland, and there is a change happening. Is it fast enough? Definitely not, but we are seeing some significant improvements anyway.
Avinash, you're a criminal defence lawyer. What offence does tech-based abuse fall under?
The primary offence would be stalking or intimidation. There's a less prosecuted offence of used carriage service to threaten, offend or menace, but the main one is stalking.
You've defended clients who have been accused of these sorts of offences. Is it difficult to prove guilt?
It can be. The reason is these offences are what are known as specific intent offences. That means that in addition to proving the act, the prosecution also have to prove a mental element, and the mental element is that they intended to cause mental or physical harm. Now that might be quite simple in some cases, for example, Alexandra's case or Nicole's case, where the messages speak for themselves, but in other cases where the stalking might be more surreptitious and the intention of the person might be not to get caught at all, it becomes very difficult for the prosecution to prove that the person had any intention to cause anyone any physical or mental harm because they didn't intend to get caught at all.
Di, 5 years after he first started stalking you, Max was charged with stalking.
Yes.
Was he convicted?
Yes, he was.
What was that conviction?
not long enough. So he was looking at a total of 15 years and 3 months. He received 8 months.
So he got 8 months and you were stalked for how many years?
5, yeah.
How did you feel about the sentence?
Because we were in lockdown, there was a chance that he may not go to jail. So to receive a sentence was something. He then also got a 2-year corrections order upon release. So to justify it in my own mind, I thought, okay, it's nearly 3 years that he will be under surveillance himself. So two years earlier, he had gone to jail for what? He also stalked my youngest daughter. So he went to jail for her and he only got a month for her.
Nicole, the woman who was harassing you was eventually charged. What was the outcome?
So she was charged with unlawful stalking, but I should also note that, you know, I had to provide a lot of extensive evidence to get that across the line, and I think being a journalist, I had an advantage there to know how to do that. I think a lot of people would be in a situation where they just couldn't provide the required evidence. Ultimately, she pleaded guilty to unlawful stalking and was given a 2-year probation order, and I was awarded a 2-year restraining order.
So what did that mean? That she couldn't be X number of metres from your house?
Yeah, it meant she couldn't be a certain number of metres from my house, and that was because she had indicated through her contact with me that she knew where I had lived, and she'd published that online as well. And she was not permitted to contact me directly or indirectly or refer to me online, so it was very digital specific.
Were you satisfied with that outcome?
Oh, look, yes and no. I think on the one hand, it's difficult because you've gone through so much over such a long period of time, and you know that the impact that it's had on you is going to last a long time to come. On the flip side, I researched stalking extensively, and I think I was very fortunate to get an outcome at all. So when I look at it that way, I think, you know, I'm satisfied that I was able to get a charge across the line, because there are so many victims of stalking that are left on their own.
Alexandra, you're a US citizen, you live in Bali, your stalker is from the UK. Has that made it harder for you to get help?
Definitely. At first, nobody wanted to help me and everybody wanted to hand this off to any other jurisdiction. I think what was helpful, to be honest, is that my story went viral. And I think that that is an odd benefit that I had that really put pressure on authorities to take responsibility, to show to people, to the UK, to women in the UK, women who are following my story, that they do care and they're willing to intervene. But I really do think that if I hadn't had my story go viral, that anyone would have really been eager to take it on.
This is a video recording of a camera we have just found in our ceiling vent.
The camera that you found up there was just like it would just fit in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, it was tiny. It was like this big.
A traveller's worst nightmare. A home advertised on a couch-surfing website by a man police say was secretly recording his guests in the shower.
The angry renters forced to live with, wait for it, 8 CCTV cameras inside their share home.
There we have one more camera that looks at us when we're cooking our food, and there's one right over there on top of those stairs that pretty much sees everything.
Daniel, you and Nathan also lived in that share house. Were the cameras there when you first moved in?
No, unless they suddenly appeared out of nowhere, they weren't.
Would you have moved in if you knew there were cameras there?
No, I don't think I would. I think if I was just looking through all the options and, oh, it's a nice room, an ensuite, you know, perfect, camera, no. That's probably my reaction.
Not what you're looking for in a home.
Yeah, I don't think it's the defining feature.
Nathan, when did you first realise that you were being watched in your home?
We had renovations that were sent to us via email. We're having the kitchen renovated. And while the renovations were being done, another tradie was in and he was installing some cameras everywhere.
Wow.
He ended up installing 8 of them around the property and 6 of them were inside.
How did you feel when you saw them? What did you think was going on?
I felt scared. It was worrying for one. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to be safe in my own home. I didn't know who was watching on the end. I didn't know my landlord. I didn't know why they were being installed. We had given no reason why. It was halfway through a lease. It was very uncomfortable, the entire situation.
You emailed the agent saying this is not on. What did the agent say back?
The reason they mentioned, the reason they gave for the cameras being installed was anything broke, they would be able to find the person who did it, ensure cleanliness of the property, and they said there was no real way we could have the cameras removed, although we pleaded to.
So there was nothing you could do?
Essentially, no. We sort of found out that no matter what we tried, no matter how many emails we sent and how uncomfortable we felt, there was nothing we could do to remove the cameras.
Avinash, you're a lawyer. Is it lawful to install cameras in a situation like this?
There's different legislation in different jurisdictions. So in New South Wales, for example, the owner does have a right to install cameras in a property. It can't, however, record what are private parts or where a person would reasonably be expected to be engaged in a private act. So for example, bedrooms, bathrooms, things like that, that's a no-go. But in the common areas of a premises, it is technically, there is no offence.
What's the legal basis for that?
In Queensland, it's the Criminal Code. Section 227A is the only offence, and that sets out that it's only where a person is engaged in a private act.
Daniel, what was it like feeling like you're being watched all the time?
It felt like Big Brother, but without the audition. I think I woke up one day and I saw a camera that was pointed to the door of my room. And then I remember, okay, no, we didn't agree to this. Wait, this doesn't feel right. I started overthinking. I started looking at what type of camera model it could be. I looked on Amazon. It was the third option, ultra-wide camera, microphone. I felt really, it was very confusing because they could look into the entrance of my room, and it was an old house. It was really thin. You could hear me snore sometimes. You could hear me stomp my foot and you'd hear it in the kitchen. Who knows what they could hear?
Nathan, did this affect how you behaved around your house, how you felt?
I remember many conversations we had in the lounge room, and we paused mid-conversation looking up at the cameras going, I don't think we can have these conversations. I don't know who's listening. I sort of felt like I lost a little bit of my humanity in regards to no longer was I able to hang out in the lounge room and feel that nobody's watching or sing in the shower if I wanted to and know that no one's listening. It was a little bit like I couldn't be myself in my own house. I was restricted to a small bedroom in order to get privacy. I felt like I was really being watched no matter where I was.
Did you know where the video feed was going?
No. As Daniel mentioned, we looked up the model number, and I rang up a security company just to ask, and they said it can go straight to your phone. So we were worried it was going, who knows where, we didn't know.
Grant, it's fairly easy, I gather, to access cameras and tracking devices like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Straight off any website. You can buy it off Amazon, eBay. There's no restrictions around where or what you can buy.
Is it often the case where people notice much later on that something's been installed?
Yep, absolutely. It's a matter of identifying certain areas, and working with people to identify that, somebody's turned up at a location that they would never ever turn up to, or things like that. And it's a process of elimination, really, to especially with tracking devices, to be able to identify that there is something there first.
You work with victims of domestic and family violence. What does that involve?
So we work with women and children around increasing their safety and security, both in the home. We go and assess a property, we risk assess perpetrator behaviour and put mitigations in place to try and keep them safe, and put recommendations back to non-for-profits who look after them to increase their safety. And we can go and actually scan the vehicles, and we look for these devices, and then we do a bigger piece of work around their safety planning and working with the police, working with the women and children to be able to safety plan to keep them safe and get them where they need to be so they can live a life of normality.
What should we look out for on our phones to see whether they have been compromised?
Anything around sort of if you see that your battery's being reduced really quickly, that the screen might jitter and shake, that if you feel that you can hear someone on the other end of it, upgrading your software. If your phone won't allow you to upgrade, the iOS software or anything like that, it usually means that your phone has been jailbroken and there is a propensity for someone to put an application or software on there. So all of those sort of things, and people have got great instincts, especially in the family violence sector, when they know when something's not right. So we listen very carefully to what the women have to say to us, and we deal with that at the time. So.
Di, you've now bought a tracking device of your own.
Yeah.
What's it for?
Well, I actually haven't bought it. It was given to me by a company in Queensland called Stand By You Foundation. So what happens is if I'm in trouble, there's a special button on this watch and it sends out alerts to 5 family and friends. So they get told my exact location. They can hear what is going on. They can call police, send them directly to where I am. And the phone itself also records what is happening for 10 minutes.
Why is it important for those people to know where you are?
My stalker is relentless. The community corrections order has expired now, so he's free to come and go and do whatever the hell he wants. So I'm still hypervigilant, and this gives me another level of safety.
Nicole, the woman who stalked you for 3 years was convicted and had an intervention order to stay away from you. When does that order expire?
That order expired about a week and a half ago.
Has she been in contact since then?
No, she hasn't been in contact, but the thing about stalking is that you can provoke fear in someone in really subtle and sneaky ways that do evade detection. And I will say there were some social media posts that I was made aware of that would have indicated that she was counting down to the end of the restraining order.
Oh, really? How did that make you feel?
Really anxious, because it was such a process to get a conviction in the first place. And I was told by the police officer who helped me so much that once the restraining order is over, you're essentially starting again. So the crime is not continuing. You would have to then go through the process of proving pattern, intent, and all of those things from the beginning.
Has your relationship with social media and technology changed?
It really has, and I have quite mixed feelings about that. I think when it comes to technology facilitated abuse and online stalking, there's a real tendency to put the onus completely on the victim to change all of their behaviours to protect themselves, which I think is terribly unfair, and it's in the modern world it's the wrong thing to do.
Nathan, do you and Daniel still live together in that share house?
We don't, no, no longer.
Now when you go and lease a place, are you just checking every corner?
Yes, under every rock, yes. No, it's now I always will go in for an inspection and I will always check. If anything's not to my liking, I'll make sure. But I've thankfully not come across any more cameras in any properties since.
Alexandra, you make a living through social media as a travel influencer. The man who stalked you was arrested in the UK. Has he ever faced court?
No, he was arrested and released on bail a few days later, and he was placed on bail conditions that prevented him from contacting me or traveling. They took his passport, and those expired about 6 or 7 months ago. So since then, he's gotten a new passport, he's traveled internationally, and he still contacts me, and he's talking about coming back to Bali. And, like we know, these kinds of obsessions aren't a normal mode of interest in another person or like an infatuation. It's an obsession, and people can hold these obsessions for years, decades. My stalker is extremely mentally ill, and he still believes that, all my social media posts are secret coded messages about my love for him. So he's free, he's still out and about. I'm hoping that will change very soon, but there's been no charges pressed in no court.
Where does that leave you, as your livelihood depends on putting yourself out there?
One thing that is sort of a benefit of my work is that I'm always moving. It'd be really challenging, I think, for him to find me, especially because I post typically delayed. And it'd be hard for him to quickly come to Ethiopia and find me somewhere. So that is a weird benefit, but it's challenging. I mean, I have to keep living my life and choose to believe that, that he'll make it known when he's following me, which is another sort of backhanded benefit I have, is that he tells me what he's doing. So I've just chosen to keep living my life, but it's always there. It's always lingering. I get emails from him, daily, threats, and I just thankfully have a really supportive community and amazing friends that when I feel like giving up, because this is so demoralizing to do over and over again for so long, that I'm just keeping going and hoping that this will result in a conviction.
Cameron, you used your car's GPS feature to find out your partner at the time was cheating on you. How do you feel now about trust in relationships?
It was purely a one-off. Not every woman or every person is like that, is dishonest or is going to cheat. Life for me now is great. I've met someone who I don't have to second guess. It was very upfront and open, and I never have and never had any reason to see where they are or their location. So life's great.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you all for being here. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.